has always been a constant in business. But in recent years, it feels like we have been asked to reinvent ourselves almost daily, every day, every moment. Now, for many leaders, the question is no longer when will things settle down? It is how do I keep moving forward when stability may never come back? Welcome back, listeners, to today's episode on BizBlend Podcast. I'm your host, Sana, and today we are going to explore what it truly means to be an architect of change. Not just reacting to disruption, but designing pathways through it. And listeners, my guest, Rick Yvanovich, has built a global footprint across industries and continents, translating decades of experience into practical strategies for thriving in uncertainty. He's not just studied change, he has lived it, led it, and written the roadmap for it. So, listeners, let's dive into this conversation about building something better, even when the ground beneath us is constantly shifting. So, Rick, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really pumped up for this conversation.
Thanks for having me, Sana, and thanks for such a lovely, lovely introduction. Now, before we start, I'd like to expand a bit on this core belief that I have, and that is we all have the potential to be architects of change. So let me explain that a little bit more. So in the world that we all live in, it's really all about constant transformation, and our task isn't just to keep up, isn't just to keep our head above water, it's to shape the path forward. Every day, our actions, whether they're big ones or small ones, they actually shape our future. And as we discuss things today, Sana, I want everyone listening to remember this. You are your brand, and every single decision that you make is part of the unique story that you're crafting for yourself. How you react, how you adapt, and how you innovate will define your story and your legacy. So, as we dive into our conversation today, Sana, let's not just think about adapting to change, but about how we can define it, as we're not just participants, we're catalysts in this ever changing business as unusual world. So let's get started, Sana.
Wow. What a brilliant beginning to this conversation, Rick. I think that is a really, really empowering way, especially when it comes to change, because most of us we're always in that rat race to adapt to it, but not becoming the catalysts of bringing change. So yeah, that's really empowering. Okay, let's begin. So, Rick, let's start with your journey first. I mean, you have lived through countless business cycles and disruptions. We are seeing a lot of disruption right now, whether it's technology, whether it's economy, it's global, geopolitical. I mean, there are so many factors affecting change in our everyday lives, whether it's professional or personal. So, in your eyes, what makes this era of change fundamentally different from the ones you have seen before?
I think what's different is in the past, as you say, things have happened. We've had cycles,
Mm,
but there's been a feeling of what shall I call it? Let's say normalcy or business as usual. And this is really where the architect of change and came from, because during the pandemic,
mm,
the COVID pandemic,
mm,
which was a cycle, which was a happening that literally no one, or if I believe no one, had ever experienced before. There was no playbook, and during that, the business leaders that I come regularly into contact with, too many of them and people around them were saying, when this is over and we get back to business as usual. And that used to really, really, really wind me up because I thought, hey, get real. There's no going back to usual. You can't put Jack back in the box. all of this is unusual. So this, coined the term business as unusual, and was actually the name of a book that I ended up writing and publishing during the pandemic. And the subtext of that book is how to thrive in the new renaissance. And I believe that's where we are now. The As we've all experienced in the last, ever since the pandemic, to 20 till now, so the last 4 or 5 years, just when you think it's over, if, and you think it's going to go back to normal, something else has happened. There's been some kind of shock, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's a geopolitical thing, and it's just going on and on and on. So it's just underlining the fact that there is no going back to usual. There is no going back to normal. We are living in a world of business as unusual. Things are going to continue to keep happening, and we need to be more resilient and agile to deal with them. Now, where the architect of change comes into this sort of context is in my book, one of the tools that I gave to help people put structure back into their lives and meaning back into their lives is to use the metaphor of a castle. Because we can all imagine what a castle is. However, the castle that I'm describing has different components, has got different buildings in it, and they each represent a different aspect of life. Okay. And so, just like if you're building, you are the architect building your own castle. You are constructing your own life. However, we can only lay like one brick a day, so we have to lay that brick with intent. You know, there are about 8 buildings, in the castle, 8 different aspects of our life, so we can't look after them all at exactly the same time. We have to make a choice, and that's a really, really hard choice to make. And that's why I say that with the architect of change, because business and life is all about change, it's constant change, and we have to make conscious decisions to decide how we lay our bricks, how we take those steps, how we move forward.
Hmm. That definitely calls in, to bring a lot of mindfulness and intention and clarity into build our castles brick by brick. So, Rick, also, did you think, especially leaders today, are they overestimating how unique these challenges are or underestimating them?
Both.
Oh.
I think both. At the end of the day, when we're hit with something, when something new happens, if it really is that new, if we have no playbook for it, and these are the really unusual ones, the real curveballs that are being thrown at us, we don't know how disruptive they're really going to be. So, to one extent, we can underplay how disruptive they are. Okay. And oops, we might slip up because we soon realize, oops, they really are highly disruptive. And so therefore, we didn't give them enough attention. On the other hand, if we think the world's going to end type of thing with every single one of these unusual things, you might get the opposite. So it's a tricky thing, and so that's where where balance comes in, okay? And the challenge that we have is to seek to achieve balance. And when I say balance, I'm talking about um, achieving balance in all the elements of my metaphorical castle, because we're architecting our lives. So, you know, imagine you've got different buildings in a castle, let's say there are 4 towers. You can't well, you could have one tower that's immensely tall and the other ones you haven't built yet. That's slightly out of balance, isn't it? Because you're focusing on one area and not another area. And that's why the balance, when I talk about balance, I'm not talking about work-life balance, which don't get me started on that. That really winds me up. Because, there are 8 different elements to the castle, therefore 8 different elements to life, and we have to bring them all into balance. Now, when it comes to leaders and things happening, and are they underplaying or overplaying, is again, are we reacting to what's happening, or are we sticking to an existing game plan? Again, going back to my castle, something's happening, something's attacking our castle, or something, is impacted. What's it going to do? Which areas of our life are going to be impacted? Which areas of our business are going to be impacted? It's not necessarily all of them, but we have to look at things holistically to see, you know, some areas may be incredibly obvious where it's impacting us. But taking the more holistic view, we have to also look at the maybe less obvious things. One of the things, the unusual things that have hit people, although it's not necessarily unusual these days, is several years ago, generative AI came out, and Chat GPT came out. And, there's all sorts of scenarios popping out about that. It's going to take over all our jobs. All right. That's not quite true. It's going to save us, gazillions of money, and we need less people. Well, that hasn't necessarily manifested either in lots and lots of firms. And like all of these things happening is, yeah, maybe it's still too early to find out what the impact of it's going to be, apart from it is major and there isn't a playbook. We can't look up an instruction manual and tell us what is this going to do to us. So it's very, very evolving. And a bit like the pandemic, something brand new that we weren't prepared for. These are the type of happenings that I think are going to become more and more common. And therefore, it's important for us to have a clear idea of where we're trying to go and how we're trying to get there. Because the risk is stuff happens and then we start reacting to it and we lose the plot.
Mm, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if we, you know, I'll just, because I usually, when I have conversations around this, we do a kind of rewind of all these major global, globally impacted changes. I mean, we talk about generations. Every generation has seen, cataclysmic shifts, like whether it's industrial revolution, it's the dot-com boom, or it's the global housing crisis that we saw in 2008, and now pandemic, and then the AI kind of invasion here. Uh, would like to call it, but it's actually not. Uh, I think your approach, it calls for a proactive preparation than a reactive, approach. And do you think, Rick, this business as unusual, is it the future is it going to be a future winning formula for the thriving leaders? Is it something that's going to differentiate a good leader or a thriving leader or thriving company than just a normal average company or leader?
It's a very, very good question. Is it a silver bullet? Um, for those people who embrace it and follow it, like myself, yeah, I think it is. It works for me. Um, but at the end of the day, there are lots and lots of models out there. There are lots and lots of approaches to do things out there. Even if there are given playbooks, there are lots of playbooks out there for exactly the same thing. And the issue is that since, as individuals, we're all unique, and also our businesses. If we're talking about entrepreneurs, your business is also unique. Then
Mhm.
you have to find the tools that work for you. You have to have a belief in it, a real belief in it, and so therefore the the framework that I use, are, this first book, Business as Unusual, was written for the business leader, because it was triggered by the pandemic. I could see people needed help, getting out of the fog, as it were, that they were in, and what they really needed was to be able to create their own path and have a bit of a playbook to create that so they could regain their confidence. Because I
Mm.
guess that's what really happens when these shocks happen and we start reacting to them. Things are not going to plan, and we start maybe doubting ourselves, and we start becoming unsure of what to do. And to me, that's the danger, because they are the red flags that are on the road, unfortunately, to failure and or the lack of success, because it could result in non-action or just
Mm.
reaction, which is a knee-jerk reaction without the real deeper thought into it. Whereas I advocate, yes, we do need to be more proactive. We do need to have some clarity on the direction we're going. And by that, what's our North Star? What's our life purpose? Is our life purpose in alignment with our goals, with our core values? Is all of that in alignment with whatever organization that we're working with? There's a lot to keep in alignment. Because if you have that, the even when things happen, we at least have a direction that we know that we need to go in. Um, the I mentioned that I'm also a coach, and again, one of the reasons why I came out with this model was I was coming across too many people who were either stuck in a rut,
Mhm.
um, who were trying to get from A to B and was still in A and seemed to be going in circles. I guess that is being stuck in a rut, and were just generally unsure because y- you know when new stuff happens and you are the business leader and you hesitate or you're not sure how to move forward,
Mhm.
people can perceive you and they're watching what you're doing, and that inaction is another red flag because it actually triggers a lack of confidence in you as a leader, which may start a downward spiral. You see, hey, you're supposed to be leading these people, and they're losing confidence in you. They're not following you anymore, and you pull yourself down into into a downward spiral as well. So yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Sana. I'm really in for that proactivity.
Um, and as you mentioned that you are a coach, now it's a very, very interesting, observation. Have you found this habit easier to adopt in established companies or in startups? Because um, generally people would say, okay, startups, they are more dynamic, they are flexible, um and a founder has, they are already prepared with that mindset. They have kind of signed that consent form that I'm already there to kind of fight head on with those changes or those shocks. So what's your observation on this?
It's always driven by the individual. At the end of the day, some individuals um, embrace models like this because the change begins with themselves. So you've got to be
Hmm.
open to change. It's a bit like if they were a coachee, a client that a coach is coaching. In order to be coached, the coachee needs to be open to coaching and be willing to be coached.
Mhm.
All right. If they're resistance to any change, then they're potentially uncoachable. So you've got to start with yourself. So it doesn't really matter what the organization is. However, to reframe your question in a different way, if you take an individual who's embracing these changes and is growing and is changing their mindset, okay, how do they then cascade that into the organization around them? Aha. Well, again, the smaller, more entrepreneurial organization may be more open to that, especially if that person is one of the leaders. If it's a much larger, more established organization, with hundreds of people or thousands of people, significantly larger than that small entrepreneurial SME venture, then yeah, that's a lot more people that you have to try and convince and trying to overcome their resistance to change.
True, true, true. And yeah, do you think, Rick, that resources sometimes become a barrier, making these large, enterprises or big companies slower to change than they should be? Or is it something kind of intrinsic, because of the.
It's I believe it's a cultural thing. Um, maybe I'm being far too stereotypical there and saying, "Hey, large organizations are hard to change." They're hard to change. In respect that they are massive. If you have 100,000 people in the organization and you're trying to change something, well, that's going to be harder than if there are only 10 people in the organization. Because if it's going to be human led and it's going to require the change in behavior of people, is just more people to change behavior. That being said, going back to the culture side, it really depends on what the culture is within the organization to cater for change, what their appetite for change is.
Yeah, that's such a fascinating point, Rick. We often assume the ones with the biggest war chest will win, but as you mentioned that word agility, it can sometimes be the stronger currency.
Absolutely. I mean, why are some startups, what some of these smaller organizations, you know, becoming successful? It's maybe because they are highly agile. Okay.
Mhm.
With a startup, you're willing to pivot. Okay. Or it's easier to pivot. So you come up with some brilliant idea and then you realize that you're going to market, even though you've tested it, it's still not getting the traction that you want. But then you notice something else, and you might be able to pivot to something even better. And I've seen that in my coaching of startups. There's several of them started, their business was ABC, and then, within years, they're now doing XYZ, which is far, far more successful for them.
Hmm. Yeah, that is so true. That is so true. Um, and another aspect of this uh, becoming proactive towards change or business as unusual, especially in a business setting, is how leaders they have that communication or dialogue with their team members or with their people, because sometimes the people who are working with you or the team who's working with you, they may feel out of place or not included in those plans of change. What's your opinion on this, Rick?
But there are a few aspects of this. If, should we say, the leadership of the organization has decided that a change needs to happen, whatever the change is, it's it's how are they going to communicate that change? Are they going to
Mm.
just tell the organization, you know, we were before our strategy was to go left, and now our new strategy is to go right, and it's just that's it, no negotiation, we're just telling you now, let's go. That's one way of doing it. um, or is leadership communicate here in a different way, um, getting input from other people, and ending up with a solution that gets us to turn right, which appears to be a solution generated through discussion with the organization.
Mm, mm.
So, do you want to follow what someone says you have to do? Or would you rather follow something that you've contributed to and came to the conclusion that's what we need to do?
Yeah, that's $1 million question, Rick.
Okay, so it is a matter of how it's communicated, but it's also, when we're talking about changes, how we're realizing a change is needed in the first place. Is that some kind of light bulb thing that a leader said, or was that actually reading the signs that is coming up from within the organization? So it's not just being having that culture of how do we adapt to change or how do we cater with change. It's also what is the culture of the organization?
Mm.
How does the organization surface new innovation and new ideas? Does the organization embrace failure, or is failure, shunned? Does it encourage people to speak up and engage, or does it not do that? And as the workforces are changing and we're becoming more Generation Z heavy, um, and a lot of organizations are multi-generational, then there really is a requirement to have a different mindset to cope with all of that.
Hmm, I agree. I agree. And as you talk about multi-generational, and it's so fascinating to see, Rick, that you have worked across different industries. I mean, there's accounting, IT, talent management, and then oil and gas. Now, these fields, they don't always move at the same speed. So I'm very sure our listeners will be curious to know, how do you personally stay adaptable when shifting between such different worlds or industries? What's your secret sauce?
There are a couple of answers to that. Um, it helps that I've worked in a lot of different industries. I've had a lot of different jobs. I've worked for a lot of different companies. I
Mhm.
have a very, very eclectic background. But putting that aside, so that's not just industries, it's also working in many, many different countries. I've done projects in 40 different countries. But I'm a accountant by training, um, and our main business is implementing accounting systems or financial ERP, whatever you want to call them, and that's very, very horizontal. It's literally the same across the world. Um, there are only some statutory variations, and yes, there are some industry variations, but the sort of accounting language is very, very common across the world. So you know, I do come from that numbers background, and that was that was a way of communicating with people. And if I'm speaking to accountants elsewhere, we're speaking the same language.
Mhm.
Some years ago, probably about 15 years ago, when the company was scaling, and I realized I don't actually understand people because I'm a numbers person. I'm an accountant. Nothing against accountants, but it's just me. Um, I came across psychometrics, which I saw as, oh, it's a mathematical scientific formula. It's my instruction book on humans.
Oh.
So I got heavily into that, and actually, that's I got another company I helped co-found, and we sell that around the world as well. So yeah, I understand the similarities and differences between people. Okay, we are all fundamentally the same, but we're not exactly the same. I said right at the beginning, we are all unique because we are human, and we are unique because we are human, and because we are human, we are unique. Um, and so, although, I can go from country to country, and some things are similar. There will always be nuances that are different. And it's I I guess you gotta go out there and you gotta understand that and you gotta experience it, okay? Traveling, living, working with different nationalities, visiting different places, on the planet, and you will see the similarities and you will see the differences. And the similarities and differences are wonderful. I mean, it's nice to go somewhere that may seem strange and weird, but you go there and says, "Oh, these things are the same," and you feel, a little bit more comfortable, should we say. But on the other hand, is experiencing those little uniquenesses, those little different things, that helps open up our minds, I think, makes us more open-minded to experiences. And as we expand our minds and as we experience more things, we can start, when we, let's say in our life and also in our work, we can start taking on different perspectives. And that really, really helps us become more open-minded, more tolerant. Um, and, it okay, for larger companies who are global, yeah, it's part of the, secret sauce for being, for being successful. Because the worst thing a company can do is assuming, "Hey, it works in company A, in country A, now I'm gonna bring it to countries B to Z, and it's gonna work exactly the same way." It doesn't quite work like that.
Yeah, yeah. I, um, I really love that, and I absolutely believe in that. When you explore different industries, cultures, countries, it really, really opens up your mind. It gives you that clarity and that, welcoming, uh, that, kind of habit or skill of welcoming different perspectives and changes as well. So, yeah, now I understand it.
Definitely, yeah, and it's not you don't, even travel within your own countries. I mean, especially if you live in a large country, and there are, there can be massive regional differences, time zone differences, as well as, different accents, even different languages, different subcultures within the same country.
Yeah, true. That is so true. That is so true. And India is such a befitting example of that.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, your the food styles from one end of the country to the other end of the country is a wonderful spectrum.
Brilliant. And Rick, before we conclude this brilliant conversation, um, just a final quick question. Now, many would believe uh, there's also kind of, a discussion that change leadership has now become a buzzword. You know, consultants and speakers, they sell frameworks, but they don't always have to deal with the fallout of failed change in the trenches. So, how do you keep your work from becoming just another theory on a slide deck or on a book?
Well, I live it. Okay, I live it. I'm constantly changing myself because what is change? Change is growth.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what it is. Growth happens beyond our comfort zone. Which is why I call my style of coaching dungeon coaching, because I have to inflict a little bit of pain because I've got to stretch you. I've got to stretch people. Um, and, as leaders, if we want to grow people, and I believe that as leaders, we need to grow people because after all, that's what we're doing. We're maybe taking in an undergraduate, a graduate entry, a very young person, and we're helping them along their career path. And maybe one day they can take over the organization or they can be one of the senior leaders in the organization. You can go put your feet up. So, we need to create other leaders. And to do that, we need to teach people on how to grow. And in order to grow, we need to change, and change starts with ourselves. So it's not just, hey, Rick changes, and how do I deal with the fallout because other people can't cope with it? It's like, okay, who are the other people? All right, if there are my employees, the people around me, like, what's the issue? Um, all right, they can't change at the same speed that I am changing. All right, let's do some coaching of them. Let's come up with a different roadmap for them, so it can go at their pace that they're comfortable within, and to go in the direction that they want for their own personal growth. And that's the challenge, I suppose. As an organization has its own thoughts of what it wants its people to do. If it's entrepreneurial, it's your an organization that you own, you are the owner of it. You have your own idea as well. But it's filled with individuals, unique individuals, and they may not necessarily be 100% in alignment with what you or the organization wants. Um, because that happens. You could call them hiring errors. But because a lot of people aren't really sure what they want. And they may join your organization and then leave. And sometimes they leave because they want further growth, as in your organization is not growing them fast enough, or they realize that it was a bad choice of theirs in the first place and they don't like it. There are many reasons. And again, to be proactive about it all, we have to cater with the different needs of all these people. I'm a bit biased about this. I like growing people. And so I look at these things and we look at how do we grow people? How do we support them? Because I believe for a organization, if we get that right, if you're an organization known as deliberately growing people, deliberately helping people learn and getting more capable, then that in itself is a magnet to attract people. Okay, but like all magnets, um, it also repels people, so it also pushes away the wrong people. And if you happen to like that type of environment and you're in that environment, well, you're quite happy to stay there because it's in alignment with what you want anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's very well put, Rick. Brilliant. So, of course, Rick, if our listeners they would like to connect with you and get hold of your book as well, Business as Unusual, what would be the best way?
The best way to get hold of me is to go on my website, which is my name, rickivanovich.com, or for a laugh, why don't you just Google my name and see if you can find me anyway? There's something a little bit unusual there because I'm the only person on the planet with my name. And it's not great SEO. I just happen to be the only person on the planet with this name, which is a bit of a cheat, bit unusual. I'm also, of course, on social media, especially LinkedIn. And again, just use my name. It's that unique.
Wow, that's a gift, and I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes for our listeners for their easy reference. And Rick, this was a masterclass because I'm personally reminded that being an architect of change, it doesn't mean we have all the answers. It means we have the courage to ask better questions and the discipline to build with what's in front of us. So, uh, you know, let's just say that change isn't something to wait out, it's something to work with, something to embrace. So, thank you so much, Rick, for your wonderful insights and your experiences. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sana. And as we close, I just want to remind everybody and leave everybody with just a final thought. Please remember, you are not just a participant in this ever changing world, but you're an architect shaping the course of your life, your career, and the world around you. I encourage you all to embrace the change and define it rather than just react and adapt to it. Be that catalyst in your own business as unusual world. The transformation always starts with you. And I'm eager to hear about your journeys. So, Sana, really thank you again. I can't express my gratitude enough for letting me speak on your wonderful podcast today. It's been a really fun conversation, and I hope our listeners have enjoyed it as much as I have. And to all listeners, I really appreciate your time and attention. And I look forward to hearing from some of you, learning from your experiences, and perhaps sharing some more in depth future discussions. Thanks again, Sana, and to all our listeners for this wonderful exchange.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you so much for your beautiful words. And before we wrap up, I'll just leave with this question or with this thought. Now, for every leader, founder, or dreamer who's tuning in, maybe the question isn't when will things go back to normal, but what am I willing to build now that I couldn't before? With this, we conclude this brilliant episode, which has been a masterclass on the BizBlend podcast. Until next time, keep blending courage with curiosity on your own path of change. Thank you.